16 electric vehicle models will be able to receive subsidies from the U.S. government under the Inflation Reduction Act, with Korean-made EVs excluded for failing to meet requirements. What does this mean for the domestic auto industry? President Yoon Sung-yeol calls for eradicating the spread of narcotics in the once drug-free country, as teenagers are seemingly facing an alarming exposure. The UN Security Council convenes a meeting on North Korea's first launch of its solid fuel ICBM, but ends with no outcome. Good afternoon. We begin with the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, under which 16 electric vehicle models will be receiving subsidies. But those by South Korean automakers, Hyundai and Kia, have been left out as they fail to meet tight production requirements. But this may not be all bad for the domestic auto industry. Our Choi Soo-hyung explains.
The U.S. government announced on Monday local time that 16 electric vehicles would be eligible for subsidies of up to $7,500 in accordance with the detailed guidelines of the Inflation Reduction Act. All the 16 selected models are American-made, including Tesla's Model 3 and Model Y, Chevrolet's Bolt and Equinox, and Ford's E-Transit and Mustang. As a result, not only Hyundai and Kia by Hyundai Motor Group, but also Nissan and some American-made electric cars that were originally eligible for subsidies have been excluded from the list. The new guidelines for the IRA have reduced the number of eligible models significantly as battery requirements were strengthened in addition to the final assembly requirements in North America. If more than 50% of the battery parts are manufactured and assembled in North America, a subsidy of $3,750 will be given. An additional subsidy of $3,750 is given when more than 40% of the key minerals are mined and processed in the United States or FTA countries. In this regard, industry officials have analyzed that a decrease in the number of eligible vehicles overall is not the worst situation for South Korea, because the number of vehicles getting the benefits has been reduced from over 40 electric vehicle models.
In the long run, South Korea is actually going to benefit greatly from this, because the estimates right now are that in a few years, South Korean firms from LG, Samsung, and SK on will make and basically be most of the batteries in the United States, up to 69% of them. And so while there will be short-term challenges for Hyundai and Kia, for South Korean battery manufacturers, this is going to be a boon.
In response to the IRA guidelines, Hyundai Motor Group is speeding up the construction of an electric vehicle and battery plant in Georgia, set to open by 2025, and it is also considering replacing the Chinese-made batteries for the GV70 model with North American-made batteries. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Amid allegations of the U.S. spying on South Korea after the recent leak of intelligence documents, Washington says it has a good relationship with Seoul, saying there has been no damage to its partnership with its allies because of the leak. Lee Eun-jin reports.
The suggestion that Washington has been spying on some of its allies, including South Korea, following the recent leak of classified documents, has put the U.S. South Korea alliance in the spotlight less than 2 weeks ahead of a Biden-Yoon presidential summit. During a briefing on Monday, Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said an internal review assessment is being conducted and that the Department of Justice is leading an ongoing investigation to better understand the scope and scale of the leaks, including getting a better assessment of what documents exactly were disclosed and where they surfaced online.
The Secretary and senior Pentagon officials continue to convene daily meetings to examine the scope and scale of this disclosure, as well as ensure that appropriate mitigation measures are being taken.
There's also some speculation that the leaked documents are forgeries. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and his South Korean counterpart Lee Jong-sup spoke last week and both agreed that the classified document had been substantially forged. When asked about this, Singh said the situation is under review and refrained from giving specifics. And as to whether Washington would apologize to Seoul if wiretapping allegations turned out to be true, the press secretary reiterated that the U.S. commitment to South Korea is rock solid and that Washington has a positive relationship with Seoul. On the same day, National Security Council Coordinator John Kirby said that there had been no damage to partnerships with allies due to the leaks. Singh added that the relevant departments will provide the secretary with initial findings and recommendations within 45 days to improve the department's policies and procedures related to the protection of classified information. 이은진, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council meeting on North Korea's launching of its first solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile ended with no meaningful response. The North slammed the meeting, calling it an intervention in its internal affairs. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Last Thursday, North Korea fired its solid-fuel Hwasong-18 intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time. The United Nations Security Council responded by holding an open meeting at UN headquarters in New York on Monday, with the meeting being convened at the request of South Korea, the United States, and Japan. During the meeting, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield strongly condemned North Korea's repeated violations of Security Council resolutions, calling for a united response from the international community on what she called a threat to not just Northeast Asia, but also to world peace and security. Along with the U.S., other UNSC members, including Britain and France, expressed concerns over continued provocations from North Korea. But China again backed its ally, saying that United States military exercises near the Korean Peninsula using nuclear aircraft carriers and B-52 bombers made North Korea uneasy. Russia's ambassador to the UN also slammed the U.S., saying that the UNSC meetings should not be used for political propaganda purposes, adding that additional sanctions against North Korea is illegal and unilateral and would not take into account the desperate situation inside the country. Meanwhile, in a statement carried by the state-run Korean Central News Agency, Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission of the ruling Workers' Party, Lee Byung-chul, accused the UNSC of engaging in domestic interference against Pyongyang. He also stressed that the North's advanced strategic weapons development is a legitimate self-defense measure aimed at defending itself from threats from the U.S. Lee also slammed the U.S. for calling the North's exercise of rights to self-defense a provocation and threat through the mobilization of the UNSC. The vice chairman is known to have led Pyongyang's nuclear and missile development since the early months of Kim Jong-un's rule in late 2011. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Top diplomats from Washington and Tokyo met on the sidelines of the G7 foreign ministers meeting and emphasized the importance of trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan to maintain a free and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. In a press release, the U.S. State Department said the Secretary of State Antony Blinken congratulated his Japanese counterpart Yoshimasa Hayashi for the recent progress on bilateral relations between South Korea and Japan. During their 20-minute meeting in Japan on Monday, the two officials also reaffirmed the importance of their partnership to respond to issues surrounding North Korea and Ukraine. President Yoon calls for eradicating the spread of narcotics in the once drug-free country as teenagers are seemingly facing alarming exposure.
지난 10년 전까지만 해도 대한민국은 검찰, 경찰은 물론 해경, 보건당국, 세관 등 많은 기관의 협력과 노력으로 마약 청정국을 유지할 수 있었습니다. 그런데 어느 순간부터 정부 당국의 방치로 마약이 국민의 건강과 정신을 황폐화시킬 뿐 아니라 청소년의 꿈과 희망을 파괴하고 있습니다.
The president was speaking as he presided over a cabinet meeting on Tuesday morning to discuss a variety of issues. He also discussed ways of preventing nepotism in the workplace, saying that such unfair employment practices are against the nation's constitution. He also called for ministers to prioritize budgeting to make sure no taxpayers' money is wasted. In the meantime, the government has another major issue to tackle: rebounding oil prices. Amid price pressures elsewhere, the government is reviewing whether or not to extend the current fuel tax cut. Our economic correspondent Shin Na-hyung reports.
With oil prices hitting record highs around the world last year, South Korea has been offering a temporary concession on fuel to ease the burden on drivers. Currently, the tax cut on gasoline is set at 25%, while the rate for diesel is 37%. With the rate set to expire at the end of this month, the government will decide this week whether or not to extend the discounts.
We will make more proactive efforts to review the opinion of the National Assembly from the perspective of the burden on people's lives.
The finance minister's remarks came in response to a request from South Korea's ruling party to the government regarding continuing with the fuel tax cut. With a recent announcement by OPEC Plus about production cuts, oil prices are seemingly on the rebound, with prices in general likely to be affected.
Considering trends in general prices and oil prices, as well as the burden on the people, we urge the government to actively consider extending fuel tax cut measures for the time being.
However, the government cannot extend the fuel tax cut indefinitely due to rising concerns about a deficit in overall tax revenue. South Korea recorded its greatest ever on-year tax revenue decline earlier this year. According to the Ministry of Economy and Finance, the country's tax revenue for the first 2 months of 2023 came to around 54 trillion Korean won, or $41 billion, roughly $12 billion less than in the same period last year. With tax revenue and rising oil prices in mind, the government may look at a compromise option, meaning further fuel tax cuts at a lower discount rate. Shin Na-hyung, Arirang News.
Google's parent company Alphabet saw its stocks drop by nearly 3%, following a report that Samsung may be reconsidering its contract to use Google as a default search engine on its devices. Alphabet stocks plummeted by 2.78% on Monday after the New York Times released an article the previous day about the approaching renewal date for Samsung's contract with Google. It reported that South Korean tech giant is considering switching out Google for Microsoft's Bing following the launch of its ChatGPT-powered AI chatbot. Google earns roughly $3 billion a year from its contract with Samsung Electronics and is working to integrate its AI chatbot Bard in its searches. Flights to and from South Korea's southern Jeju Island have been canceled due to strong winds. According to Jeju International Airport, as of 11 a.m. Korea time, 163 flights, 77 outbound and 86 inbound have been canceled. A total of 480 flights have been scheduled for today, and more could get canceled as the day goes on. The Korean Meteorological Administration has issued a wind advisory to the island, with areas near the airport experiencing wind speeds up to 27 meters per second, similar to that of a typhoon. Strong winds are expected to persist until the evening. BTS member J-Hope begins his mandatory military service on Tuesday, becoming the second member of the group to enlist. The 29-year-old will first begin his 5 weeks of basic training at an army boot camp in Gangwon-do province. His enlistment comes as the group's agency Big Hit Music earlier this month announced that he will fulfill his mandatory service as an active duty soldier in the army, but said there will be no ceremony for fans on the day of his entry. J-Hope hosted his last live stream on Weverse, a fan community platform, last Friday to bid farewell to his fans. He follows fellow BTS member Jin, who joined the military last December. Now, just in time for the 70th anniversary of the Seoul-Washington Alliance, a group of students from New York took a field trip to South Korea, exploring all things K-culture. Our Kim Jung-shi spent the day with them.
Students from New York wearing traditional Korean clothing, hanbok, are visiting Gyeongbokgung Palace.
1, 2, 3.
They stop at every step to take pictures, as if to capture each moment. On this field trip, a total of 105 students from 5 schools in New York came to South Korea. Democracy Prep public schools teach Korean as a second language and have Korean culture classes. This is because the founder of the school spent time in South Korea and was dedicated to bringing Korean education and culture back to the U.S. One student said she enrolled in one of the schools because of her mother's interest in K-dramas.
When my mom first came to America, she was obsessed with K-dramas. She would watch them on cable, and she wouldn't understand the language, but she would read the subtitles. And she was always really involved in the culture.
Korean is really core to the starting of Democracy Prep, our school, and it's something that we also really value in terms of offering our students a perspective of a culture and language that is not something that they've seen before, most likely. We really value the Korean values around education.
In the afternoon, the students gathered at hiker ground near the Cheonggyecheon stream to experience the more modern side of Korea. Hiker ground is run by the Korea Tourism Organization, which said this is a good opportunity for future generations to build friendships during a year when the two countries are celebrating the 70th anniversary of their alliance.
As you can see, the students are using these sets at hiker ground as backgrounds for their dances, just like K-pop idols.
In a K-pop dance class, students learn how to dance to one of the latest K-pop hits. Many of the students picked up the dance moves quickly and filmed their own music videos.
I think it was a fun experience, but I was a little nervous because it was really short. But I think I'm happy with the overall video. I think it was a good experience that really opened my eyes, and I do look forward to coming back to Korea eventually.
The students we met said they hope to use their knowledge and experience of the Korean language and culture in their future endeavors, and said this won't be their last time visiting South Korea. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Imagine a robot that senses your movements and mimics them. Well, local researchers have developed a motion-sensing robot, and when widely adopted, this technology could boost working conditions and safety at construction sites. Cho Sung-min tells us more.
Avatar is a film that opened our eyes to the new world of cinema, not just through its colorful and sharp computer graphics, but also with the technological imagination it succeeded in emulating on screen. One of the examples would be the technology that links Jake, the lead character, with the blue-skinned alien creature and makes it move freely according to how he wishes. And recently, local researchers in Korea have succeeded in bringing a part of that technology to actual life. The humanoid robot here makes the exact movements with its fingers, hands, wrist, neck, and waist of a person sitting in the driver's seat from far away. Because the user is wearing a type of headgear with a VR screen attached, he or she can see what the robot sees. The robot can sense the user's motions remotely and either turn on or off a switch, move heavy objects, and even shake hands. The technology is also equipped with highly sophisticated motion sensors and 4 infrared cameras that can detect the user's movements however subtle they are. And the overall user experience of it offers an additional feeling of presence and hands-on experience, as users can feel the weight in their arm when the robot is holding a heavy object. Another example of that would be the trembling of the arm when holding onto an electric drill. The team says all it takes to work is a wireless network to get it up and running. As of now, they have succeeded in operating a robot in Seoul from their Ulsan office.
The robot's vision and the data make it feel as if they are right inside it.
The team say the robot could be used in various hazardous working situations and construction sites, as it can carry out delicate and dangerous tasks. Cho Sung-min, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Top Kremlin critic Vladimir Kara-Murza Jr. has been sentenced to 25 years in prison in Russia's latest crackdown on opposition figures. The sentence was handed down by a Russian court on Monday on charges including treason and spreading fake news about the Russian army. Kara-Murza is an award-winning human rights activist, a journalist, and a dual Russian-British citizen. The 41-year-old has been vocal in his opposition to Russia's war in Ukraine. He was arrested in Moscow in April last year, just hours after a CNN interview where he said Russia was run by a, quote, regime of murderers. He also denounced Russia's invasion of Ukraine in a speech to the Arizona House of Representatives in March of that year. It was the same month that Russia criminalized criticism of its military. The court's conviction has been denounced by Western governments and human rights organizations. Moving over to Sudan now, at least 180 people have been killed over 3 days of heavy fighting in a power struggle between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The clashes broke out across the country on Saturday local time. The international community has called for peace, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying there's a shared deep concern among allies. Meanwhile, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development has said that the presidents of Kenya, South Sudan and Djibouti will go to the Sudanese capital of Khartoum to try broker a ceasefire. The violence comes on the back of a proposal that would transition the country's military government to civilian rule and would see the RSF become part of the Sudanese army. The United States Federal Bureau of Investigation has arrested 2 men for allegedly running a secret Chinese police station in New York City's Chinatown. Both men have been charged with conspiring to act as agents for China and obstruction of justice. Prosecutors also charged 34 others who live in China in connection to the case. The operatives allegedly established the station on behalf of the Chinese Ministry of Public Security in early 2022 and harassed Chinese dissidents in the U.S. But it was closed just a few months later after operatives became aware of the FBI's investigation. The secret station is believed to be part of a global network of such facilities operating in 53 countries. Beijing denies operating the stations and called them service centers for overseas nationals. And finally, in the U.S. state of North Carolina, a man relaxing in his yard had a startling encounter with a wild bear. Surveillance footage from a doorbell camera shows David Oppenheimer relaxing in his lounge chair when the black bear casually strolls next to him. Both froze in shock after noticing each other, with the bear running away after a standoff lasting several seconds. Oppenheimer said that he had received a notification earlier in the day to keep an eye out for a wandering bear, but saw nothing on his outdoor cameras before going outside to enjoy the nice weather. The bear had reportedly been in his yard before the encounter, likely searching for food, as it ate from his bird feeder and dug through a neighbor's trash. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Quick moving showers rolled in for the morning. It's gradually letting up from central regions, while the south coast and Jeju Island could see rain into Wednesday with heavier showers at 20 millimeters an hour at times. But along with rain, those of us in the west coast and Jeju Island are dealing with strong winds with a wind advisory issued. So Jeju Island will be rainy and windy all day today. Temperature-wise, highs are going up a couple of degrees higher in the capital this afternoon. Then summer warmth is ahead for Wednesday in Seoul with an expected high of 27 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, southern provinces are having highs dropping down a couple of degrees lower today, hovering in the low 20s this afternoon. Air quality is normal to good nationwide today and into tomorrow. After today's rain, there will be days with partly sunny skies with occasional clouds, and tomorrow's summer warmth will be short-lived. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of the day.